Thank you very much. My name is Mark Connolly. I'm the host of Edmonton AM on CBC Radio, our morning show here in Edmonton. I'm your MC for this evening. Thanks for letting me be a part of this tonight, and CBC is glad to be loaning me out for the night. Just a couple of housekeeping items. The fire exits are over on the right. If something were to happen tonight and the alarm went off, we all have to head out that door and then turn left and into the field. And there'll be an impromptu soccer game, I believe. But just grab your purses or personal belongings on the way out, and that'll be fine. If you don't want your picture taken, get a neon dot sticker from the membership table, and they'll avoid that. And then the restrooms, I believe, are they over there? Yeah, they're over there. So you've probably found them. You can always ask one of the REACH volunteers who have one of their badges on, and they will help you out as well. And if you haven't taken time to fill out the evaluation cards, I think a volunteer has dropped one off, or a bunch of them at each table. If you fill it out and just evaluate the kind of experience you've had during today and this evening, any comments you want to make, that will go into a draw. We have 9 different door prizes, but you have to fill out the evaluation to get into it. We have passes to Jurassic Forest, passes to the Royal Alberta Museum, gift certificates, and much more. So with that out of the way, I want to welcome everybody to the 9th Annual REACH AGM and Showcase Celebration. Thank you. So throughout the evening, we hope you'll be informed, entertained, and inspired. And I'm sure today was very inspiring. I want to thank all the city councillors and MLAs who've taken time out of their busy schedules to join us this evening. I know the MLAs have got something going on over at the Ledge called a filibuster, which has led to the longest sitting of the Alberta Legislature in history. So David Shepherd tells me. I would trust him for sure. So we would like to respectfully, off the top, recognize that we're gathered on the traditional land that is territory of Treaty 6 First Nations and the Métis Nation of Alberta Zone 4. We acknowledge and thank the diverse Indigenous people whose ancestors' footsteps have marked this territory for centuries. It's a welcoming place for all people who come together and call our collective home, and we call upon our traditions, honor traditions and spirits to work in building a great city for both present and future generations. And no matter whether you're a member of an Indigenous group or not, you are a Treaty 6 person, because it is 2 sides. At least it should be. So as such, we'll begin the program with the blessing from Elder Philip Campio. Elder, please come up. Please welcome him.
That light is bright. Tawao umuta ski anatsigisagaw. Miwitin kanipo numuta. Kwegmiasan anatsigisagaw. I welcome you here to Treaty 6. It's a wonderful day today. It's a beautiful day. And it's wonderful to be on this land. Welcome. I'm originally from Treaty 8 in the north, that way. 3.5 hours of drive. It's called Drufpile Cree Nation. But I make my home here by Stony Plain on the land of Treaty 6. And when I talk about Treaty 6, my grandmother, in a Cree we call them Kokum, is originally from Alexander Cree Nation. Her name was Mistahayos Nigiyosku Kapamotit. And to translate that, that's the little big woman that can walk anywhere. And my grandfather is from the north, but he actually originated from the Sioux country, and part a little bit Sioux and mostly Cree. And in our language, we don't call ourselves Cree. We call ourselves Nihio, and that's 4 body parts. And today I stand here and honor Treaty 6, and that when I talk about Treaty 6, it's not just to talk about the land. I mentioned my Kokum, my grandmother, that at one time she roamed this land until quite a few years ago, and she was part of Papa's chase. in the beginning, which was a reserve here in Edmonton, just on the south side. And I wish the mayor was here, because I'm telling him we're taking our land back. But it's an honor to be here, and today I welcome you all, and I'm going to say a prayer. And today we're going to pray for community, for wellness, that we live in a diverse world today, that we can learn to understand each other, that we learn to understand who we are as a person. It doesn't matter what color our skin is. We all breathe the same air in this vibrant city. And today, all I ask for in my prayers is that we have good health in our life, happiness, and most of all, a good understanding, to walk together, to walk in unity, and to accept each other for who we are, that we're all equal today, and that regardless of what happened to us, the Indigenous people, regardless that we had to prove who we are on this earth, that today I stand here on behalf of my people, and I humbly ask them, my ancestors that once walked this land, to be with us. And at this time, I ask you to stand up. And we pray today. We always start a prayer to acknowledge who we are, pray for our well-being, that we have a balance in our life, mind, body, and spirit. Because when we have balance, then we can walk a straight line. And today we just pray that that road, that straight line we walk, is we're going to create a community, not only for ourselves, but for our children and our children's children. So this is what we're praying for today. So join me in prayer. Nuta wisimantu hasanat sigisagaw hasaminan kuitsamatan piwichunan numuta ski inskitinan tanchisa kanipo numuta piwichunan koyas kapamutinan igami gigway mayatan kagispayan. Creator, grandfathers, grandmothers, I call on you today as I stand here in the circle of life. I humbly ask you to bring blessings of compassion, of kindness, and the understanding that we can look each other in the eye and have a good feeling, that we can share the blessings of joy, the blessings of happiness, and that most of all, as we walk in this diverse world, that we can walk in unity, that we can walk together, that we can learn to understand and help each other, and that from this day on, that we can build a community, that one day our children and our children's children will take over from where we left off, and that this community will grow to an understanding that we are all in this together, that we walk in harmony. I say a special prayer for the organizers that brought this together, that brought forward all the people to make this work. Give them special blessings today and walk with them. And I humbly ask you for a special prayer for the people that are walking to Calgary for the walk of common ground, that you will bless them in their walk and be with them. This is what I ask of you today, holy ones. Take my prayers to Creator and be with us. Hi. Thank you.
Thank you, Elder Philip. We now have a video greeting from MP Randy Boissonneau, who is unable to join us this evening.
Hi everybody, Randy here in Ottawa. Wish I could be with you. We've got a few more weeks here to wrap up. I'll be back every weekend, but I wanted to say have a fantastic Reach AGM. Thank you all of the board members, all of the staff, all of the clients for making Reach what it is today. Whether it's the Canadian Municipal Crime Network that you're an active part of, whether it's welcoming newcomers, working with the Muslim newcomers, helping youth, or just providing all of the support that you do to make sure that we have a safe, healthy, and caring community. I want to thank you on behalf of all of my Edmonton and Alberta colleagues, and indeed on behalf of my colleagues from coast to coast to coast, for making Edmonton what it is, thanks to the work of Reach. Have a fantastic AGM.
Thank you, Randy. Now, Councillor Sarah Hamilton was supposed to be here tonight to bring greetings on behalf of Mayor Don Iveson, the Edmonton City Council, but they're in the middle of a public meeting, which has gone over, so Sarah wasn't able to be here tonight. And we will welcome, though, on behalf of welcome Vice Chair of the Reach Board, Ben Wynot, who will speak on behalf of Chair Pilar Martinez, who is unable to be here tonight. So, Ben.
I feel like I was just up here. Just in case you haven't had enough of me. Thanks very much, Mark. On behalf of Pilar and our entire board, it's truly a pleasure to be able to say thank you for attending our AGM and showcase events tonight. For those of you who weren't able to be here, I just wanted to say we really had an excellent business meeting earlier today. We had some laughs, we had some tears, we had some audited financial statements, and even a new set of bylaws for Reach approved at last. Try not to be too excited. But perhaps even more thrilling than bylaws, if there is such a thing, 3 new board members were also elected at our business meeting, and so they've been on the job for about an hour, maybe about 30 minutes. I'm not sure what they've accomplished yet, but I have the enviable task of introducing our newest members to you, and I would like to ask them to stand for a moment so that you can see them as I do that. And so first up is Adil Hassan. He is currently the Vice President and Chief Operations Officer for Hasco Development Corporation. He has extensive experience in the community. He currently serves as Vice President Civic Engagement for the Alberta Muslim Public Affairs Council and co-founder, Secretary, Treasurer of the Al Mustafa Academy and Humanitarian Society. He has written for the Canadian Muslim News and served as Communications Director for the Edmonton Council of Muslim Communities. Adil is right over here. Thank you very much. He'll be a great addition to the board. Lee Newton is currently the Corporate Development Manager at Champion Pet Foods. She's a chartered business evaluator, a chartered accountant, and holds a master's degree in professional accounting and a Bachelor of Science. Because that's clearly not enough degrees, Lee is also an MBA candidate at the University of Alberta School of Business. She serves on the board of directors for the Valley Zoo Development Society. She has served as the treasurer for Wings of Providence and also on the board of the Edmonton Humane Society. So thanks for joining Reach, Lee. And we've also appointed Matthew Ward. Matthew is the Coordinator of Planning and Engagement at Homeward Trust Edmonton. Matthew completed his Bachelor of Arts in Critical Indigenous Studies at the University of British Columbia. His research interests include decolonial Indigenous research methodologies, queer Indigenous studies, and more recently, the study of homelessness as settler colonialism. That sounds really fascinating, actually. We'll have to talk about that more. Matthew spends time volunteering on the annual steering committee of YEG Youth Connect, an annual event that supports youth experiencing housing insecurity and homelessness in Edmonton. And we're really glad to have you on board, Matthew. And I also want to welcome back the Honorable Laurie Hahn, who will be continuing his service with the board as an appointed advisor representing the Edmonton Police Commission, a very critical relationship for Reach Edmonton. Thank you very much, Laurie. And Robert Philp, just very narrowly, was re-elected for a second term. I'm just kidding, it wasn't narrow. Bob was actually the lead for our board subcommittee this year on recruitment, so he should be here basking in the success of recruiting 3 excellent new board members, but he's unable to make it tonight, so I get to take all the credit on Bob's behalf. So we're very glad to have Bob returning as well for another term. And I just wanted to introduce you to the rest of our board, who I would just ask to give a little wave as I say their name. Linda McConnon, our past chair, is here. We have Mr. Brad Justin, our treasurer. I'm sure their feelings won't be hurt if we just applaud for them all at once at the end. But Donna Ludvigsen and Grant Erickson. Donna's the chair of our Policy and Governance Committee, and Grant is on the Finance Committee, but I think they had to run. Tim Adams is here, Director at Large. Allison Downey D'Amato is here. And Ben Weinlich is somewhere, maybe? He may have escaped. And Dr. Chris Wells is not here, I believe. If he is, I haven't seen him. He's been very elusive. So I just wanted to say that now that you know who our board members are and what we look like, don't hesitate to come up and talk to us, including me or any of them. We don't get a lot of opportunities like this to be in one big room together, and so I would really encourage you to come up to a board member and talk to them a little bit about what REACH is doing, what you think REACH should be doing. We really, really value your thoughts, ideas, and insights on community safety and the work of REACH Edmonton. We value your thoughts, and we actually really need them. So with that thought, I just wanted to say thank you for attending this showcase, and I hope you have a really enjoyable event.
And now I'd like to welcome REACH Edmonton's Executive Director, Jan Fox, to bring some remarks. I'm sure you all know Jan. She's been the ED of REACH since 2011. Before that, spent 30 years working in corrections, which has given her a lot of insight into the kind of work that is being done by REACH, especially trying to work now and learn. She's learned much about what causes people to come in conflict with law. Now she gets to work on the other side. So, Jan.
Thanks, Mark. Every single year I tell you not to talk about those 30 years, and every single year you still do the same thing. So, and again, I'll tell you the same thing I say. I started when I was 12, if anybody's doing the math. This is a wonderful group. Thank you all so much for being here. There are seats at the front. Don't feel like you have to stand up. Come up here. They're a friendly group, right? Ben, thanks. You're a hard act to follow. That was... I've never heard anybody before make policies and finance and all that so exciting, so thank you for that. All right, so as was mentioned, this is the 9th AGM for REACH. I can hardly believe it. I see, Kate, you presided over the first one, and I've been here the others. And I'm also glad to see who you're sitting beside. We're really honored today, and this is the first time in a while that we have had two incredibly special people join us. And can I get you guys to stand up for a minute? This is Fred Rayner and Lindsay Kelly. Now, these are the two people that co-authored the original REACH report. So it's pretty amazing. I hope that you're just thrilled to see how many people are here and joined in what you guys created. So thank you so much for everything you've done. Okay, so we're also, as you know, in for a real treat this evening with our guest speaker, and we'll get to, Mark will introduce him more formally in just a few moments. But as always, it's my great honor to give you a little bit of the year in review. As you've also heard me say before, I'm always really humbled to stand here and tell you about the collaborative work of REACH that we do with our very valued partners, and so many of you are in the room today. I see right here there's a group from the Police Youth Engagement Program. Thanks to you guys all for being here. It's amazing, and many, many other partners. And I can never quite find the words to thank everyone who's come on this journey with us. You have before you, as was pointed out in those of you who were here for the meeting portion, the annual general meeting portion, you have in front of you the annual report that really does highlight some of the successes of our partners in 2018. But I just really wanted to highlight a few things that we're really especially proud of. So this year, we acted as the supporting agency or backbone organization for 17 initiatives. We're really proud of that number. I promise I won't mention them all, but please take the time to look at the annual report to see the incredible work of our 17 partner collaborations. So just want to touch on a couple new this year is Coalitions Creating Equity, the Office for the Prevention of Violence, the 60s Scoop Indigenous Society of Alberta, Supportive Transportation Work, Resource Connect, Not in My City, and the Canadian Municipal Network on Crime Prevention. So just a little bit about each of those. The Alberta Human Rights Commission honored us by asking us to be the backbone organization for Coalitions Creating Equity. This is a 2-year pilot project in partnership with 5 municipalities across Alberta. This coalition addresses issues of equity, racism, and human rights. Very important to our topic today. I hope that you all had a chance to see the amazing exhibit. It's called I See You in one of the back rooms. It's going to be up after the showcase, so please take the time to see it if you weren't able to. And that exhibit was made possible to be here because of the partnership with Coalitions Creating Equity. We're proud also to work with Dr. McCoy and the Office for the Prevention of Violence as they work to better understand hate-motivated violence and how we can best address it. We're also proud to be partners with the 60 Scoop, again new this year, Society of Alberta, as they work tirelessly to raise awareness of the devastating and generational impact of children being removed from their families. Resource Connect, I think some of you in the room were at that, was a resounding success where we brought together more than 75 agencies working to serve our most vulnerable in Edmonton. And with the supportive transportation piece of work, very new too, is partners in the community identified to us a true gap in service delivery, wherein there was a lack of supportive transportation for our most vulnerable to get to those services that they needed, perhaps to see a medical doctor, to get to substance abuse treatment. So we're working with a group of people that work in the inner city to create a sort of a supportive transportation initiative. And the Not in My City initiative, that's very new to us as well this year. And that, some of you might have heard of the very famous singer Paul Brandt, the country and western singer Paul Brandt. He's championing an initiative called Not in My City and asked Reach to backbone the Edmonton portion of that. And that's an initiative looking at and raising awareness about the horrendous effects of human trafficking in our city, particularly as it relates to young girls and women. You'll be hearing more about that in the coming year. So back to some of the other projects that we've been particularly involved in over the years that you've heard me speak about before. I want to mention about RAP-ED, and everyone is aware of the RAP-ED program, the gang prevention strategy. It marked the close of its 5th year and showed absolutely impressive results in gang prevention programming. And it really, truly impacted systemic change, but was in danger of being discontinued due to lack of funding. So while we waited for some government funding to come through, we were so gracious and grateful for the Edmonton Community Foundation and the Edmonton Stollery Foundation, who stepped up to provide bridge funding for that, so that kids in this community are still being served. And a really good statistic about that is that we learned that for every dollar invested in that, we received a social return on investment of $1.36. So very, very impressive results. Another project that I wanted to bring you up to date on a little bit was our YEG Ambassadors. And that's a group that is working to build greater social cohesion and opportunities for positive, respectful interactions with businesses in our community. That's an area that we've been wanting to tap into for a long time because we feel that businesses are really have a say and should have a say in community safety. And these ambassadors have been working in our most vulnerable areas, giving the tools to businesses to create safer streets and spaces. Earlier today, I was so pleased to be able to announce that the Kingsway District Association saw a need in the community with our 24/7 crisis diversion work. The City of Edmonton very generously funded that work, but we had one small thing, and that was we didn't have an extra van that we needed. And by the involvement of the business community and the Kingsway District Association, they not only did they donate the van, but they donated all the maintenance for the lifetime of the van, including if there was a crack in the windshield, all of that's going to be taken care of. So can you just join me in giving a shout out of appreciation to them? Back to the work of the ambassadors. From March to October this year, the ambassadors connected with 424 businesses and 241 residents and visitors. So that's pretty impressive numbers. The teams also helped to address issues of social disorder in the city, including helping to pick up discarded needles, dealing with issues of graffiti, illegal dumping, and problem properties. All really important. We do also continue our work with the All In for Youth initiative. We co-backbone that with the United Way, and we pay particular attention to the out-of-school time programming. This year, with out-of-school time programming, 4,200 youth participated in our programs. 37 different partners delivered programs, And 33 schools provided free space to make these programs accessible to kids throughout the city. I'm moving on a little bit now to the 24/7 crisis diversion I mentioned about the van. That's, of course, I think most of you know, it's a diversion program so that police aren't tied up dealing with issues of social disorder that they don't need to be, freeing them up to deal with higher level tasks. This is where we have a team of people that help provide help provide those experiencing a non-emergency crisis to get to a safe place. And that's when, if you don't already know, you can call 211 instead of 911 and we'll dispatch that team. This, of course, contributes to the decriminalization of poverty, mental health, and addictions. And here is a number I think that you will see is very impressive, is that team dealt with 14,412 cases this year. And that's due to the great work of our partners at Hope Mission, the Canadian Mental Health Association, and Boyle Street Community Services, and of course, Edmonton Police. I mentioned the Police Youth Engagement Program. Very proud of the work of that. We're going to be sponsoring another one this year. But what's really impressive about the Police Youth Engagement Program is not just what happens in that time that they're together in a classroom situation, but how we've developed great leaders like the ones you see before you who are helping to mentor other youth in their community. We're really grateful for that. And speaking of gratitude, we're particularly thankful to the City of Edmonton, to the Government of Alberta, and to Canada for their great support. And I wanted to point out that we're very pleased to have MLA David Shepherd and MLA Irwin. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here. These two were up all night, as was mentioned, and I think are going back to be up for a little bit longer as they fight for changes in labor regulations. So thank you for the work you do. I really want to thank the amazing board represented today by Ben, who just made it fun for us, and thank you for that. And welcome so much to the new members. We're really looking forward to having you on. So yes, let's thank them. I've always said that I'm fortunate to have a great board, a board that really understands governance. But this year, they took it to a whole new level. They cleaned up the bylaws. They made our finance understandable. They were supportive, like unbelievably, to the staff. They created a new orientation that you guys are going to be the pilots of. And it's just been a spectacular year. And I really thank you all for your leadership. And lastly, how could I ever stand here without the amazing REACH staff? Could I have everyone from the REACH staff, are you in the room? Please stand up. I see they're all along. Stand up. You guys are absolutely amazing. I just can't believe what you accomplish. Talk about a small but mighty team. Thank you for everything you do every day. And without further ado, I'll pass it back to Mark.
And I made a note, next year I won't say 30 years. I'll say 3 decades. Sounds shorter. Now, we are excited to have 3 local artists presenting a spoken word piece together for us tonight. The spoken word performance aims to understand the ways in which racialized people navigate the world by focusing on one of the most central parts of our identity. This piece centers around our names. We discuss what our names mean to us, the microaggressions we face, and the ways in which we carry the names of those who are killed before their time because of actions taken as a result of institutional racism. Timiro Mohammed is a local spoken word poet and university student. Her work is centered around her experience as a second-generation Somali Canadian. She is the co-author of the chapbook Water and a national spoken word semi-finalist, having competed at the Canadian Festival of Spoken Word with the 2016 Edmonton Slam Poetry Team. Amina Mohammed is a grade 12 student, writer, and poet. She's passionate about exploring the concept of home as a second-generation Somali Canadian woman. Amina has curated many poetry workshops and loves making space for others to express themselves through art. Ima Azura is a university student, aspiring spoken word poet who has used poetry as uncensored expression and therapeutic release ever since she was 7. She enjoys writing from the perspective of others, putting words to the feelings that often go unspoken. Ben had wanted them to come up and read the bylaws, but instead, they're going to perform an original piece for us this evening. Please welcome them up here.
be sharing your poem with you today. In my neighborhood, which is every neighborhood where they season the food too much and you only eat some boost when there's hot sauce in the house, and there's always hot sauce in the house. In my neighborhood, everyone is your family, is an ocean away, or is in it.
Because the women in my neighborhood learned how to wrap their homes up in the syllables of a name and direct themselves to safer shores. So this is for the women that carry their legacy in the lines of their face, in the bags nestled on their apple cheeks, increasing in the sunspots next to their yellow eyes.
And when their children ask them why their homes were taken from them, they will say it was because they looked different, they spoke differently, their names were difficult to pronounce. But still, you look the other way and run while your tragedy whispers, you know a girl is a gun, a girl is a gun. Our names whisper our truth. Our names look like love written on all of our faces. So when they call you foreign, exotic, different, no, they mean not from here. We are foreign. Because of the way our eyes drip honey and our skin glows underneath your accusations, look at me. I am here. I learned this language for you. For you, I tore my mother tongue out for you. I taught my lips to forget every word they knew for you. I bleach my traditions and my skin and my children.
I taught myself to speak in hues of reds and yellows for you. I forgot my name, broke my bones and pieced them back together, and still a girl is a gun, you know a girl is a gun. My Icarus wings dripping wax that smells like home remind me that my name is a prayer.
The days before I could speak for myself wrote names on me.
The taste of them drawn on my arms in blood, etched on my forehead in sweat, all of them saying, you know a girl is a gun, a girl is a gun.
So believe me when I tell you that the naming of child is a prayer, cast into the empty of night sky by an infant to a galaxy of stars even before their first words.
And my name was anointed on my forehead by my mother's lips in holy oil. This name was whispered to me by the winds that whipped past my window on the long winter nights, yelled to me by my reflection in the mirror.
For you, we stripped our names from our bodies, and our bodies slept on the pavement. So this is for my family, wherever they may be, which is to say, this is for my people everywhere who learn to grieve from behind a TV screen, the gully queens, the loud and the black and unfiltered, the ones who lay in a bed of concrete, looking up into the sky, holding a staring contest with God, waiting to enter the afterlife. Today I think of the evenings that felt like rain in my grandmother's home with her warmth beside me and the drumming on her roof asking me to wake up.
My grandmother handed my name to me on gilded platters smeared with ash and studded with precious gems, bits and pieces salvaged from the remains of a shelled-out home, the gold flaking, but I dust it off and hang it on my mantelpiece, hoping that it brings my house closer to my home.
Because my culture built a home in me, and here I am trying to build a home for myself. So I will learn to say my name without teaching bone to twist itself, without bending over backwards or moving in reverse. I will say it the way my mother and her mother before her did. I will learn to write myself into the margins of stories and still find family in every neighborhood filled with tourists and foreigners and immigrants. So when my children ask me why they tried to take our names from us, I will tell them it's because we looked different, we spoke differently, our names were difficult for them to pronounce, and this has always been our war. Thank you.
Excellent job, ladies. Now time for our keynote speaker. Paul Schmitz builds the collective leadership of organizations and communities to try to create and achieve greater social impact through his role as a senior advisor at the Collective Impact Forum and CEO of Leading Inside Out. He is also the author of Everyone Leads, Building Leadership from the Community Up, and the former CEO of Public Allies, where he helped more than 5,000 diverse young adults begin careers working for community and social change. Paul is a faculty member of the Asset-Based Community Development Institute, was a social innovation advisor to the Obama White House, has been named 3 separate years to the Nonprofit Times list of 50 most influential nonprofit leaders in America. He lives in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, with his wife and 5 children. Please welcome Paul Schmitz. Whoa. Let's turn it down a little bit. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. There's nothing better than finding out you're going after like the amazing spoken word artists. So let's give them another hand. Thank you for sharing your voice and perspectives with us. And the only thing a little more disconcerting than that is looking and seeing my picture everywhere I look, which I feel like I'm running for office or should, but I'm not a citizen here, so I don't think I can. Really embraces inclusion, and with lots of different people, it's always the most joyous spaces I enter and the most welcoming spaces. And whenever I'm in a space like this, I recognize, I just always wish every room I entered was like it. And this is a room that feels like a room that I wish every room I entered was like it. When I come from your less sane southern neighbor, we used to be more sane, we're now less sane. We're actually now insane. But when I come here, I'm always trying to figure out what's different, because you fly up here, you get out, and you're like, what is different here? And there's certain things, because I do a lot of training and development. I learned that a process is a process. I mean, that's kind of a start. But I realized that ending a sentence in A is a real thing in Canada. That's another thing I learned. But my other favorite thing I noticed is I always find, I learned something new tonight. I have dogs, and I believe they would be healthier if they live here, because I learned how educated people are who work at the dog food companies, right? I was like, that's a lot of degrees. I don't think the people feeding my dogs are as qualified, and it's just another reason why I think of coming into exile here. But I always think of the Canadians as a healthier country, in all sorts of ways. But one of the ways I notice is your walk signal person is thinner and has like a higher, your walk signal's healthier than our walk signal. Our walk signal's a little bloated, and he's like walking like this. Yours is like up here. It's great. So I do love coming up here, and what we're going to do today is I'm going to tell some stories and talk about leadership, but in the context of something called collective impact, which I'll talk about, which is really a way that communities are coming together to solve problems. And the other, I will a couple times ask you to engage with each other. And I'm going to have a couple activities, because I like to just have people meet and get to know each other in these events as well. And so if you try to leave during that, I'll just assume you're from Calgary, and I won't hold it to you. But anyways, to get started, what I'd like to do is talk about what this idea is of something that I've been spending a lot of my time working on, which is this idea of collective impact. I was part of President Clinton's White House Council for Community Solutions, which was part of his Domestic Policy Council. And we were charged with finding how are cities solving problems. And people kept saying, let's find successful programs around the country and figure out how to scale them. And that made a lot of sense. But something was gnawing at me about that, because I knew there were lots of great programs. And then it hit me in April of 2010. My hometown's Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and the headline of the local newspaper that morning was, we had the worst fourth grade reading scores for African American children in the country. And that was a headline we'd seen many years before. But that afternoon, I got a newsletter from the largest youth organization in the city, boasting about all the outcomes and results they were getting with the 15,000 children they serve. And that disconnect really hit me, because I thought I'd visited their centers, I'd seen the young people, my kids had gone to those centers. I knew about the other youth programs in town, there are lots of them, they're all doing great work. And I thought, how do we have so many great programs doing so many great things? And when we add it all up, we get this. And so I went back to our council and said, can we stop trying to find the one great program and ask a different question? Where are communities where they've actually moved the needle on some of these problems? Where they've cut their homelessness rate, or they've decreased infant mortality, or increased third grade reading scores, or what have you. But where are communities that have actually solved these problems? And as I began this exploration with the council, this article came out in the Stanford Social Innovation Review called Collective Impact. And the writers didn't invent the idea. What they did is they found 3 cities that had moved a population result. They had moved the needle on an issue, and they found they did these common things.
Our White House counsel found over 20 cities where we had seen a major data change, and we went to explore what happened, and we found the same things there too. And one of those happened to also be in my hometown of Milwaukee on the issue of teen pregnancy. Milwaukee had been number 1 or number 2 in the country for over 20 years in teen pregnancy rates. In 2006, when they brought everyone together, the teen pregnancy rate in Milwaukee was 2.5 times the national average. 2.5 times the national average. I mean, just off the charts. And they brought everyone together who worked on the issue for a summit in 2006. And when they did that, the first thing they recognized when they brought everyone in the room is almost everyone served girls. And they realized there was actually another part of the problem. And not only that, but they began looking at data. And when they looked at the data, one of the points that no one seemed to know was that in our city, the majority of teen births, the father was over 18. And they realized there was another problem that no one was talking about or working on. Together, they developed a comprehensive strategy of 3 strategies, and they got everyone involved in doing this work. And one of them was a massive public relations campaign with ads all over the city for years. And I have to ask at this point, here's your chance to dig at America again, which do you think was the most controversial ad? So, you won't believe this, but it's true. There's an association of snake owners in the United States who want to increase the kinds and types of snakes that can be kept as pets, and they don't like snakes represented in the media as predators and devils and things like that. So as they're taking on the issues, the United Way is taking on the issue of teen pregnancy, which has a lot of controversy attached to it. The last thing they expected is that they would get attacked by the snake lobby. But the result of their work is that over the course of the last 12 years, the number's gone down every year, and it's down 70%, 70% since they started. And that's what collective impact is about. It's about how do we actually solve problems? How do we actually move the needle on issues that we've struggled with in our communities for years? And what does it take to do that? And what we've learned is there's really 6 things that make a difference. The first is having a common agenda, figuring out what actually would have to happen and who all would have to do it to make that change. And to think big, not to say, if we've got a problem of infant mortality in an area where there's 15,000 women of childbearing age, we don't do a program and just say, let's do a program for 50 people here and 50 people here. What would it take to really move the needle? And to build the strategies that would do that. The second is we have to measure how we're doing. We have to know if we're making progress and adjust our work as we go. And so it's not measuring so we can report at the end of the year. It's measuring so we can guide decisions. And so in the case of the teen pregnancy example, in the early years, the Latino rate in Milwaukee was not falling as quickly as the African American or white rates. And when they saw that, because they were looking at data in real time, they adjusted their strategies, built a task force, developed and changed their work, and within a few years it came in line. So it's sharing data and measurements so we can make sure we're making progress and doing the right things. The third is aligning action. We often have organizations serving the same families and even the same neighborhoods without even talking to each other. We have principals of schools and pastors and heads of youth organizations in the same neighborhood, and they don't talk to each other about how the children are doing. And so we have to align the people who work together on issues and start acting like a system. We have to have continuous engagement, and here the key thing is to think about our partners in community, the intended beneficiaries of our work, our residents, their families, friends, and neighbors, as partners in doing the work. Not just people we report to or advise, but people who actually are producers of the work, leaders. And finally, we have a backbone staff whose job is to manage that whole process and lead it and facilitate it, which is the kind of work that Reach Edmonton's doing here. But I would argue there's a 6th factor that's more important than all of those. And it goes back to the great management guru Peter Drucker, who says culture eats strategy for breakfast, which is if you don't build a leadership culture that will support the kind of inclusive, collaborative work necessary, you won't succeed. And that's what we want to talk about today. So I'm going to ask you to start. What I'd like you to do is I'd like you to partner with someone that you don't know, ideally someone seated not right next to you at your table. And I'd like you to share a story with each other. And this is the story. I'd like you to think about what's the earliest memory you have of the first time that you stood up for yourself, that you stood up for another person, that you stood up for a cause or issue. But I'd like you to partner with someone, and I'd like you to share with each other that first time that you stood up for yourself, someone, or something. You've got about 5 or 6 minutes, so you quickly find a partner and share that story. I'd really love it. And I'm going to ask a few of you to share it with me. Thanks. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone. Let's come back together. Thank you. Thank you. Could I get 2 volunteers who'd be willing to share your story with the group? Come on, Canadian, nice. 2 volunteers who'd be willing, yes. And if you could move over to that mic there, and is there someone over here who'd be willing to share your story with the group about the first time you stepped up? Yeah, great. And if you could come over to that mic, that would be great. It's right here. Thank you. And if you could introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Lorraine Telford, and I work with Alberta Health Services Chronic Disease Management, and we work on a project with Reach on supportive transportation. So my story is being a kid, rural Alberta, and when I was on a farm, I was sent to a farm for the summers usually. I don't know, my mom probably needed to get rid of me for times. And so I was on one of my aunt's farms, and we took the tractor for a joyride and got in trouble. So we get back into the kitchen, thinking we hadn't been found out, but we were. And my aunt took my 2 cousins, who were actually foster children, probably from the 60s scoop, and was threatening them with a fly swatter to hit them. And I said, why are you hitting them? I was involved too. I was probably 9. And she said, do you want to be hit too? And I said, I don't want you to hit anybody. And then she put it away.
Wow, thank you. That's great. Thank you. Thank you so much. And if you could introduce yourself, please. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Cheyenne.
Cheyenne.
My first time I stuck up for myself, I was about 9 years old, and it was in grade 4, and I went to an Aboriginal school. After school one day, I jumped on the school bus thinking I was the only one on the bus, but I was surprised, and there was 4 other girls on the bus already. As I proceeded towards the back of the bus, these 4 girls jumped out, and they started beating me up. And they were telling me that I was white, and I didn't belong. And I kept telling them, no, I'm Indian. Just because I have colored eyes and light skin doesn't mean I'm white. And they continued to beat me up. And I got off the bus and I went home. And my mom said, what happened? And I said, I got beat up by 4 girls on the bus because I'm white. And she told me to never allow anybody to make me feel the way I felt when I got home that day. So after that, looking back, it wasn't right. But one by one, I went and I gave each of those girls a licking. So from that day forward, I always stood up for myself. And I'm proud to be Indian. And a lot of people want to say, oh, that's wrong, you're Aboriginal, you're First Nations, you're this, you're that. No, I'm an Indian. And I'm proud to say that. And just because I have colored eyes and light skin doesn't mean anything less. I'm a treaty Indian, and I'm very proud of that. So that's my story. Thank you.
You so much. Thank you both, and thank you everyone. The reason why I start with that question is because I wrote a book called Everyone Leads, and it doesn't mean everyone should be in charge at the same time. What it means is that leadership is a muscle. And like every other muscle in your body, it only gets stronger with exercise and practice, but everyone has that muscle. And whether you first develop it while standing up to yourself with people who are being bigoted and bullying, or standing up for friends to make sure people aren't abused, or whatever that first time is, that's when we start building that muscle. And the important thing to understand is that every single person has and can develop that muscle, and that the goal of any organization or community is how do we build our collective leadership muscle to solve problems together? Because that's what it takes. And so I want to tell a few stories that really illustrate to me how I've come to think about leadership. And the first is about Biz Nash Talbot Scott. Biz was an 18-year-old single mother. She was at a technical school in the United States. She came to my organization, Public Allies. She had a 3-year-old son at the time. She was 18 years old. And she's described herself at the time as someone, she knew she was smart, but had no idea of her potential. She ended up working at an after-school program. She began committing to her own education, all while raising her son, got into a university after a year. Did very well, went to law school at University of Michigan, one of the best law schools in the country. Made the law review, clerked for a federal judge, began a career in Washington, and most recently was director of presidential personnel at the White House. Not under the current administration. Most people wouldn't look at a single-teen mother in a technical college and think there's a White House lawyer. Peter Hoffel was a different story. Peter was 27 years old. He went to college. He got a degree in philosophy, which meant that he worked at a deli. And he had really cool sandwich names. And one day a woman came to the deli and asked to hang a poster advertising our organization, Public Allies, and said that we were looking for young people who were passionate about making a difference and would help them begin careers working for community and social change. And he struck up a conversation with her, and he said at this time that he was someone who'd stay up late at night with his friends talking about politics and social issues, but never thought he could do anything about it. And the first thing he did after she left is he tore down the poster. He said he didn't want anyone else to know about it so he could get in. And he got in, and he worked at a legal aid organization. He began working with people with disabilities, found he had a passion for that population. And today he's the CEO of the National Alliance of Mental Illness in Wisconsin and one of the state's top disability rights advocates. Again, most of us wouldn't look at the person making our sandwich and think there's a leader we need. I had the joy of doing that over 5,000 times, looking for leadership where no one was looking, and seeing that we really could build that muscle among all kinds of people. That anyone who had that desire to make a difference, we could build that muscle. And what would happen when we actually built it among people? The reason why I'm so passionate about this is that was me. I was someone who grew up struggling with addiction and depression. I was institutionalized when I was 16. I was homeless when I was 18. I went to college through a vocational rehabilitation program. And as things came together because of services I received and mentors in my life, I got a chance at my university to go to this conference nearby in Racine, Wisconsin. And I sat down the first night, and the woman sitting next to me had just started this new nonprofit in Washington, D.C. called Public Allies. And she told me they were looking for young people who are passionate about making a difference and would help them begin careers working for social change. And I said, how can I do that? That's what I want to do. And she said, start one in Milwaukee. And with all the experience I had as a gardener and a telemarketer for an insurance agency, I decided to start a nonprofit organization. And as it started, we started in Milwaukee, and 90 miles away, we started in Chicago. Now, my experience was I was a 24-year-old continuing student at a university, and my colleague in Chicago had gone to Princeton and Harvard Law School and worked for the mayor of Chicago and at a big corporate law firm called Sidley & Austin. And her name was Michelle Obama. And we started building this organization together. And I would have never imagined that 3 years later, the national headquarters would move to Milwaukee. I'd become the CEO. We'd grow it to 25 cities. I'd become an advisor to her husband and help do all the things we've done since. But it's my journey and the journey of so many young people I've worked with, like Peter and Biz, that make me believe what's possible when we think differently about who leaders are and how we develop them. The way that we define leadership is that first, it's an action everyone can take, not just a position few people hold. When we shift our thinking from the noun to the verb, it opens up the possibility of what it means and who can participate. The second is really, if you think about what leadership is, it's essentially an act of responsibility. It's stepping up and owning a result. Being willing to do what it takes to make something happen, to get something done. And that's why no one can really give you leadership, and no one's really entitled to leadership. It's a responsibility you have to own. It's deciding, I'm going to get this done. I'm not going to let my friends be hit with a fly swatter. I'm not going to let myself be bullied on the bus. It's whatever that is. When we make that choice, we're taking responsibility, and that's what stepping up really is. But then if you think about the leaders you most admire and those you don't, the people you love being on teams with and those you don't, it's not about how skilled they are technically. It's about their values. Do they practice what they preach? Are they inclusive? Do they listen to other people? Do they hold themselves accountable and hold others accountable to the same standards? It's all about values. And yet, so often we talk about leadership skills, but what I'm going to argue today is that we have to start really thinking more about what are the values of leadership that make this kind of work better and makes leaders better able to lead in diverse communities. But I want to start with this idea of leadership as an action and this notion of a collective leadership muscle. And I want to tell you a story. And it's a story that is a very foundational story in the United States. It's a story of Rosa Parks and the Montgomery bus boycott, which is often seen as the spark of the civil rights movement. But I'm going to tell it to you in a way that, not knowing how all of you know it, but I will tell you that most audiences in the United States have ever heard the story this way before. And we have to start with Mrs. Parks. She was a lifelong rebel and radical. She got into fights when she was mistreated. She always stood up for herself. In 1932, she fell in love with her husband, Raymond, who was a barber. Because of his activism, he was involved in a case called the Scottsboro 9 case, in which 9 young men were falsely accused of rape. And he became a community organizer in their effort. And she said it was his activism she fell in love with, and he was the first person radical enough for her to marry. In 1943, they attended their first NAACP meeting. The NAACP was the premier civil rights organization, but it was really an association for the educated class of African Americans, the professional class. And they were working class people. She was a seamstress, he was a barber. But they found out that E.D. Nixon was running to be president of their local chapter. He was a porter on trains. And if elected, he'd be the first working class president of an NAACP chapter in the country. And so, sure enough, they go to their first meeting. Nixon gets elected president, but no one runs for secretary, and Rosa Parks was the only woman at the meeting that night. So she gets railroaded into becoming secretary of the NAACP, a position she holds for the next 12 years. Now, the thing to pause on for a moment is that in this job, it was her role to document all of the cases of mistreatment, discrimination, abuse, and terrorism in the community for over a decade. She was the capture, the repository, the person documenting all the community stories of pain. Through the NAACP, she went to trainings in Georgia and Florida by the master organizer, Ella Baker, who was the national field director of the NAACP and had been building leaders throughout the South for an emerging movement. And Ella Baker became a mentor of hers, and among other things, encouraged her to create a youth council in Montgomery, in which she would meet with young people on Sunday afternoons and work with them on ways that they could stand up to segregation in their community. Then one day she was working in her job as a seamstress for Clifford and Virginia Dewar, who were kind of well-known white liberals in the community. And they were asking her about her NAACP work when they mentioned to her going to the Highlander Folk School in Tennessee, where they ran trainings in nonviolent civil disobedience for diverse groups of activists from the South. And when she expressed interest in going, Virginia Dewar raised the money among her friends to sponsor Rosa Parks to go to Highlander, and actually took the bus with her to Knoxville, Tennessee to make sure she got there safely. At Highlander, she was trained by Septima Clark and Miles Horton, who also became important mentors in her life. And they saw her as a real emerging leader in the movement and began corresponding with and supporting her work in Montgomery when she returned. And she said that Highlander had a profound impact on her life. It was the first time she had lived in an interracial community where everyone was treated equally, and it gave her a vision of the society she wanted to live in. And I have to pause here for a moment just to say that just in March of this year, less than 3 months ago, the Highlander Center was burned down in Tennessee by white supremacists in the United States just about 2.5 months ago. And they're right now raising money to rebuild the center. But it's a center that's been a cradle of not only the civil rights movement, many other social movements in the United States for decades. And so these stories are still very real today. In February of 1955, Fred Gray moved to Montgomery. He was the first African-American lawyer in Montgomery and the second in the state of Alabama. And Rosa Parks took him under her wing and every week brought him to lunch and brought all these cases she had been documenting for a decade to see which could be turned into legal cases they could prosecute under the law. Then in February of 1955, Claudette Colvin, who was 15 years old and a member of Rosa Parks' youth council, refused to move to the back of the bus and was arrested. Now, if I was in the US audience, I would ask how many people have heard her name, and if 5% of the hands went up, that would be a lot. People don't know this part of the story. Rosa Parks, Virginia Dore, and others argued that they should use her case to challenge segregation, but the lawyers, who were all men, said she wasn't sympathetic enough. They said she was too poor. They said she was too dark-skinned. They said she allegedly resisted arrest. They said that she was just a teen and no one would believe her. They said there were rumors she was sexually active, and they chose not to take her case. 8 months later, in October of 1955, Mary Louise Smith, an 18-year-old former member of Rosa Parks Youth Council, refused to move to the back of the bus in Montgomery and was arrested. The lawyers go to her home. Her father's a drunk. They're very, very poor. And they decide again that she wouldn't be a sympathetic enough figure to organize a case around, and they don't take her case. 6 weeks later, on Thursday night, December 1st, 1955, Rosa Parks refuses to move to the back of the bus in Montgomery and gets arrested. Now, it's important to note here, this was the second time she had been thrown off that bus by that bus driver for refusing to move. It wasn't the first time she had done this, but the first time she'd been arrested for it. The second thing I have to note is when she died, the obituaries in the American press and even the songs about her and what we learned in school is that she was just a seamstress tired after a hard day on the job, that she was an accidental activist who inadvertently started a movement. How accidental does she sound at this point? So Edie Nixon and Clifford of Virginia Dore go to get her out of jail, and they go back to their home, and they spend the next few hours with her and Raymond talking about the idea of using her case as the one to take on segregation in Montgomery. And she and Raymond know they'll lose everything if they do this. And they did. They lost their jobs, they lost their home, they lost everything. But they make the courageous choice to go forward. So Edie Nixon calls Fred Gray and asks him to represent his mentor Rosa in court that Monday. And then he called Joanna Robinson, who headed the Women's Political Council in Montgomery. The Women's Political Council was an association of African-American professional women. And for 2 years, they had been urging the male-dominated NAACP to organize a bus boycott. And he calls her and says, we're going to do a bus boycott Monday. Can you get the word out? And Joanna's an English professor at Alabama State University, a state institution, a segregated, historically black institution, but a state institution. And she goes and overnight prints 15,000 flyers on state equipment using state ink and state paper in the state of Alabama. Now, if I asked any of you to make me 15,000 copies tonight on 2019 technology, you would freak out. And this is 1955 technology. Imagine that. Not great graphic design, but by 6 a.m., all the women had all the flyers, and they fanned every bus stop in Montgomery with flyers announcing that on Monday there'd be a bus boycott. And then, and this is absolutely true in how it happened, Edie Nixon called Reverend Ralph Abernathy at Holt Street Baptist Church and asked him if he could convene all the pastors in Montgomery for a meeting Friday afternoon so that on Sunday from the pulpit they'll all call for the boycott. And he says, I've got a better idea. There's this young new pastor in town and no one knows him. Let's do the meeting at his church because if he gets run out of town, no one will notice. And that is how 26-year-old Martin Luther King was drafted into the civil rights movement. They met at his church that afternoon, and it was the first time most of the pastors met him. And they were all impressed by the young man, but they saw him as a new young man in town. And they all agreed to do the boycott, and one white pastor attended that meeting, Robert Grates, who happened to be Rosa Parks' pastor. And his home was bombed 2 weeks later when it was found out he attended. And when I was speaking down in Mississippi last year, a group from Montgomery came up to me and told me that of the people in the story, he's in his 90s and still very active as an activist in Montgomery. On Monday, no one rode the buses. Everyone walked to school, to work, everywhere. And that night, they had a mass meeting at Holt Street Baptist Church, and over 5,000 people showed up. It was standing room only. And they asked the community if they wanted to continue the boycott, and the community voted unanimously yes. And they decided to form an organization that night, the Montgomery Improvement Association, to organize the boycott. And Rufus Lewis was a business owner, he was college educated, and he didn't like Edie Nixon. He had lost several elections to Nixon to run the NAACP, and he didn't like the idea that he, a college-educated business owner, was losing to an unlearned porter on trains. And he didn't want Nixon to run this new organization, but didn't think he could beat him. So he goes before the audience that night and says, we're too divided as a community. We have too many factions. And if we're going to hold together in this very difficult campaign, we need someone completely neutral to lead us. And he's a deacon at Dexter Avenue Baptist Church, so with hopes of pulling the strings behind the scenes, he nominates his young new pastor, Martin Luther King, as that neutral leader. And that's how King becomes head of the MIA that night. King then called his father, who's the most prominent pastor in Atlanta, Georgia, and his father connected him to a pastor in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, where there had been a bus boycott. This wasn't the first. And that pastor said people will walk for maybe a week, and then you got to figure out how to get them everywhere. So King appointed Lewis transportation chair, and Lewis organized a 350-car carpool that transported the entire community to school, church, work, and shopping for 12 months. To raise money for this, two women, Inez Ricks and Georgia Gilmore, created competing clubs of women who made and sold food during the week. And they would compete to see who brought the most money to the mass meeting, which would go to all the drivers for all their gas costs and all the tickets the police kept giving them. Then Ella Baker took Rosa Parks on a tour of the North to raise money from NAACP donors. The Hordens and the Doers hit up the donor community that supported Highlander. And then Bayard Rustin came to town. Edie Nixon was a member of the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters Union, which was the largest African-American union in America. And its leader, A. Philip Randolph, was really dean of civil rights leadership in the first half of the 20th century. And his master organizer and strategist was Bayard Rustin. But Rustin was a controversial guy. He had been the campus organizer for the Communist Party in the 1930s, and we're now in the McCarthy 50s. He had then gone to India, became a follower of Gandhi. He sat out World War II in jail as a pacifist and conscientious objector. And he was an openly gay black man in 1955 New York. They called him Brother Outsider. But he was the genius strategist of the movement. And he goes down to Montgomery to support their member, Edie Nixon. And Nixon tells him about this young new pastor, and he goes to King's home. And Dr. King has a man stationed on his front porch with a shotgun, a man on his roof with a shotgun, and Dr. King is carrying a sidearm. Up to that point, the marchers all carried weapons to protect themselves against the white supremacists. And Rustin sits down with Nixon and King and talks about the idea of using this movement to practice a Gandhian nonviolent civil disobedience campaign. King had read Gandhi in graduate school and was quite interested. And so the first thing he says is get rid of all the guns, no more weapons. And he said, secondly, 85 members of the Montgomery Improvement Association have been indicted by the local police. Can you organize them tomorrow to put on their Sunday best, march down to the jail, and turn themselves in, which they did. It was the first mass civil disobedience of the movement. But they're worried that this gay communist pacifist from New York was going to be found behind the scenes in Montgomery. So he moves into a hotel room in Birmingham where he coaches and counsels King every day for the next year, and in fact, for the next 12 years. He's the man who organized the March on Washington, and in fact, he and Ella Baker co-found the Southern Christian Leadership Conference to create a platform for a national civil rights movement coming out of Montgomery, and Ella Baker was actually its first executive director, not Martin Luther King. But Rosa Parks had been an officer in the NAACP for over a decade. Her husband had once been a community organizer in an effort funded by the Communist Party. So they decided in the end she also wouldn't be a sympathetic enough figure to win a national case. So yet another woman, Aurelia Browder, who had refused to move to the back of the bus and been arrested. It was her case that went up to the U.S. Supreme Court that overturned segregation in the American South. So the question is, who is the leader of the Montgomery bus boycott? That's how change happens. It doesn't diminish the immense courage of Rosa Parks or the genius of Dr. King to recognize that their leadership story is part of broader leadership stories. And in fact, when they told the stories, they always told the stories of everybody. And the question is, when we build tables in our communities to solve problems, how inclusive are we? Do we have the young people? Do we have the porters? the bartenders, the lawyers, the pastors. How deep do we look at community? And what they understood is that leadership wasn't about your position. It was about who could take responsibility and action to contribute to a common goal. And everyone at some times was leading and other times following. And leadership passed among them. And that's really how social change happens, is when we create space for lots of people to step up and lead together. That's collective leadership muscle. The second thing I want to talk about today is about values. And there's 5 values I want to talk about that I think are critical for leaders who are trying to lead in inclusive communities today. Start that out, what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to indulge me in one more paired activity, and I'm going to tell you a great story about it. But I'd like you again to meet somebody new, because you're I love looking at this audience, and you look great. And I think everyone should know each other. So I'd like you to find another person that you haven't met before, and I'd like you to interview them with these 3 questions. And then I'm going to tell you where this came from, and it's kind of a cool story. So if you take about 5 minutes again, and if you could find a partner, and I'd like you to learn these things about each other. Go. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. So about 25 years ago, there was a pastor in Cincinnati, Ohio, who was new to his congregation. And his congregation operated a soup kitchen, a meal program. And he visited and said it was one of the most depressing places he had been. And he asked the volunteers to explain to him how they kind of operated. And one of the things they showed him was not only did they provide people food, but they identified what other needs they had. And they would provide referrals to other forms of service. And they showed him an intake form they used that when someone who came for food the first time, they would ask them these questions so they could learn about their needs. And they would ask them about things like their housing or drug use and abuse and employment and income, all these things. And he looked at them and said, so the way we start a relationship with someone is by asking them these questions. And the only things that they know that we know about them are the answers to these questions. And he said he tossed it in the garbage. And he said, we're going to begin a new process. And he said, every time someone comes here, I want them introduced by what they have, not by what they don't. And every time someone came for food, the first time they're introduced based on their gifts and talents, the things you just shared with each other. He called them gifts of the hand, gifts of the head, and gifts of the heart. And as they did that, what he realized is the most common skill that people had who were coming to the meal program was cooking. So he told the congregation to stop making them food, and he created a wall of fame in the cafeteria. And he took Polaroids of people. If you don't know what it is for the younger people, you can Google it. But they put the Polaroids up on the wall with a list of their gifts. And it became the job of his congregation not to feed people, but to build relationships with people based on shared gifts. And what it is, he broke down the ceiling between what had been a church community and a church basement community and created one community. And what Damon was teaching us is something we call being asset-based. And it answers the age-old question about the proverbial glass or water bottle. Is it half empty or half full? And the correct answer is yes. It's both. And it's like every single one of us in here and everyone we work with and serve, every single one of us has all the gifts and talents you've just shared with each other. We all have fullness. Yet every single one of us in this room also has emptiness. Things we don't do well, mistakes we've made, regrets we hold. I was joking at lunch when I was speaking that one of my daughters accompanied me to a speech in Massachusetts in the spring. And she said, Dad, if you ever need help telling people about what your emptiness is, I'd be very happy to help them understand. We all have both. But community service is often people who've been defined by our fullness going into communities that have been defined by its emptiness to help people who've been labeled by their emptiness with the notion that our job is to fill them up with some of our fullness. We think that at best is arrogant and at worst oppressive. We think great leaders are those that even when staring into the emptiness of an individual or community, they find and start with the fullness. They recognize that we never label anyone by the biggest mistake they ever made, because none of us wants to be labeled that way. That we never define people by what they're not, but by what they have, what they're good at, what they bring. And when we do that, we start to also think and notice different things in communities. That's when we start to notice what's working in communities. The spiritual life, the organizations, the entrepreneurship. We notice that the woman who checks in on the young mothers in the neighborhood is part of public health. We notice the man who watches the kids on the playground every day who's part of youth development. And we start recognizing all the ways that people support and help each other. And then we realize there's all sorts of assets we can build on. And when we think that way, it allows us to think differently about how we work with community. And it allows us to start thinking about how we do work with community instead of doing work to community or for community. Second value is about equity and inclusion. And there's a lot of work right now focused on putting an equity lens on our work. And what that means is that when we look at an issue, we disaggregate the data, we understand how are different populations doing. And we recognize that we may have to target different services and resources to different parts of our community in different ways if we're going to move everyone to the same results. So the goal is no longer what we would call an equality frame, where we just focus on access to the same service and provide the same service to everyone, because we realize if we start in different places, the same thing's not going to help us equally. And we start recognizing that if there are disparities in our community, we need to target and differentiate our work so we can get everyone to that result. And that's been an important change in public policy and philanthropy in recent decades. But I would argue equally important is an equity mirror, which asks us who's at the table making decisions about our communities and the work that's happening in communities. And the question is, if we think that at the center of our table are the people we aim to help, the issues they face, and the neighborhoods they live in, the question is, how many of us at the table live in the neighborhoods that we're serving? How many of us have family members who live in the neighborhoods where we're serving? How demographically reflective is our table of the community that we're making decisions about? Do we have people who bring other experience of marginalization to the table? How many people at our table have lived experience on the issue we're working on? Or have family members with lived experience? How many of us work with the population every single day? And how many of us even supervise those who work with them every day? And if we're all on the outside, do we really have the best information about the community, the people, and the issues to make the best strategies? Back in the fall, you might recall that there was a Thai soccer team that was stuck in these caves in Thailand. And there was a big panic about how to get them out. There had been this flooding. And Elon Musk came to the rescue. Iron Man, the billionaire inventor who creates electric cars and rockets that go to the moon. And he said, I've got my best engineers working on this. We're going to build a submarine overnight and go save these boys. And he had the best technical expertise and all the resources you could imagine. And he pulled all that together, and guess what that submarine was able to do for those boys? Nothing. But the cave divers who knew the caves, who understood the water, who understood how it worked, they were the ones who were able to build a solution that saved those boys. And so often what I find is a lot of government agencies, nonprofit organizations, and foundations operate more in the Elon Musk time frame, and they would rather give money to Elon Musk than to support the cave divers. And I would argue if we're trying to solve problems in community, the best we can do is if we can have the content expertise and the context expertise working together. The context expertise are those people who know the people, the neighborhoods, the issues, and the content experts are those who understand how systems work and have experience in policy or have the research backgrounds. And when you bring that together, that's when you've got power. But so often what we do is we fill tables with Elon Musks And we never bring the cave divers or even the Thai soccer players around our tables when we're solving problems. The third is around collaboration, and collaboration is all about trust. Someone last night talked about collaboration happens at the speed of trust, and it's true. But trust doesn't just happen. It has to be built. It means that we build honest and transparent relationships. It means that we don't have a meeting before the meeting that's a real meeting for the important people and the other one's just for show. It means that there's not information that some people have and others don't. It means that we are sincere and reliable and competent in the work, and we promise and fulfill our promises to each other. And when we actively build relationships and build trust, that's when collaboration works. And here's why. Because the absence of conflict is not a positive measure of collaboration. Quite the opposite, except for there's two kinds of conflict. There's conflict that happens at the table, where we disagree over ideas and debate, where we hold each other accountable, where we offer each other help and feedback, and that's constructive conflict and leads to learning and progress and excellence. Destructive conflict is when we leave the meeting, go to the parking lot, and complain about everyone in the meeting and what just happened. And that produces nothing of value. And the question is, how do you move the parking lot conversation into the room? And it's all about trust. And so if we don't build trust, we can't collaborate. And we can build trust and repair trust, but we should never assume we just have trust. The fourth is around continuous learning. And about 10 years ago, the Echoing Green Foundation in New York, which funds social entrepreneurs starting new nonprofits around the world, asked me to come and share with them how I built Public Allies. And I started writing the speech about these things we did and realized it really wouldn't help them. And so I created a presentation called The Worst Practices of Social Entrepreneurship. And in it, I cataloged the 10 biggest mistakes I or my organization made in our first 10 years that I'd do over if I could. But I thought before sharing this publicly, I should share it with my staff. But then I was kind of scared that morning because the first slide of the deck was called Things I Suck At. And the reason was because I realized if I had been more self-aware of these things earlier, I would have hired better, I would have delegated better, I would have collaborated better, I would have been less defensive, I would have been more open to feedback, I would have been a better leader. But putting this list in front of my employees was really scary. And then something happened. Everyone started nodding. And the reason is because the things you suck at aren't a secret. If you're always late, everyone knows. If you are a procrastinator, everyone knows. If you talk too much in meetings, everyone knows. If you say nothing in a meeting and then call 5 people and gossip about what happened in a meeting, everyone knows you do that. Whatever it is, everyone knows. And as a leader, you have a choice. Excuse me. You have the choice. You can own these things, which create the possibility that people will talk about them with you, that they'll offer you help, give you feedback, hold you accountable, or you don't own these things and they'll talk about them without you. Why are we in the parking lot complaining about Tom from the meeting? Because we don't think Tom's self-aware enough that we can give him that feedback. So instead, I have to spend an hour in the parking lot hearing everyone complain about him because we can't say to him, hey, Tom, you hog the mic too much. You need to let others talk. But if we do that, then we can start to understand how to create an environment where we can be open to learning, where we can have confidence in what we bring, all those assets you mentioned earlier. Bring confidence that that's what you bring as a leader, but also have humility about your own emptiness and what you don't bring. That's why we have to be inclusive. That's why we have to collaborate, because none of us has the whole package. We have to bring our assets, and we have to bring that humility as well. And finally, it's about integrity. How we hold ourselves accountable to our own purpose and values, how we hold ourselves accountable to those we work with for the promises we make, and ultimately how we hold ourselves accountable to the communities we serve. And if we do all that, it's really our personal backbone as a leader, how we integrate all that accountability. Because if leadership in essence is an active responsibility, the price is accountability. There's no leadership without it. And so if we think of leader as an action everyone can do and create space for lots of people to step up and own responsibility to act together on common results, and we practice values with each other that make us better able to engage the assets of everyone, that make us more inclusive and equitable in terms of who we engage and engage as partners and true partners in our work. If we're collaborative and we build trust actively and build relationships, if we create an environment where we can learn and own mistakes and own failures and be open about that with confidence, we also bring greatness. And to be able to create a space where we talk about mistakes and we can fail forward. And if we can bring integrity and hold ourselves and each other accountable for the work so we can make sure we're making progress in helping the lives of others. If we can do all that, that's the kind of leadership I've found that makes communities really work. And so I want to thank you all for coming tonight and for your participation in Reach Edmonton's work. And again, just seeing all the audiences I've been with the last 2 days here has been a real inspiration for me. It really is just wonderful to see all of you and be with all of you. And I think, is there time for Q&A? Yeah. So we'll do a few questions if people have any. And also I'll just mention a lot of the things I speak about. I've got articles on my website you can find, they're free. Also, they will be selling the book Everyone Leads outside. And all the proceeds, 100% of them, go to support Public Allies and their work developing uncommon leaders in the United States across communities. And so if you're interested in learning more, you can do that and support them. But thank you all so much, and I look forward to questions.
So we have two mics set up, one over there, one over here. So please come forward with questions for Paul, if you don't mind. Anybody out there have any? Here we go.
Yeah, don't filibuster me like that. I'm glad the members of the MLAs aren't here because they're
She was
pretty good
faking
at
me
that.
out. No questions? Don't be shy. All right, good job, Tim.
Thank you very much for your talk. I was wondering, in my organization, we're really trying to hire from the communities in which we serve. Mm-hmm. And we're kind of a one step removed because our coaches, for example, we use sport as our way to reach into communities. Our coaches are our immediate connection to the community. And so they're already kind of working with us. But we want to hire people from the community into more of those leadership positions. What is the way, I know you're saying look for unconventional leaders, but have you found a more conventional way to look for an unconventional leader, for lack of better expression?
I think the things that we, at Public Allies, we would receive thousands of applications a year for the young people we selected. And so I think we had a selection rate of 1 out of 14 nationwide. And we were hiring 700 young people a year. And what we looked for weren't credentials, we looked for character and credibility. And the question to us was, what's their relationship with others in the community? How do they build relationships in the community? We would want to know that they had some self-awareness of what they bring, and again, that they had some humility about what they needed to learn and what they needed to build. That they didn't come in just like with an arrogance of I know everything and I don't need help with anything. And we looked for people who really could express some passion about wanting to be part of making a difference, that they wanted to be part of something greater than themselves. And when we saw things like that, that's what led us to believe that someone was worth investing in. And so those are some of the things we looked at and looked for in people. And we use a lot of process. I'm in Canada to not only interview people with questions, but give them scenarios and see how they would handle them. So we could get a sense that, for example, if they were working with someone who came from a marginalized background, and others on the group were bullying them, how would they handle that? How do they see, like, what do they think are the gifts of the young people in that neighborhood? I mean, it's just really using some scenarios and other things to really get under the kind of pat answers, but to really look for those kind of character and credibility things, that they build relationships and have relationships, that they want to learn and grow, and that they believe in the assets and gifts of the people they'll work with. And when we saw that, that's when we realized we had someone we could develop. Any other questions? It's always great, like it's been a long day and it's coming to the evening. I think someone's coming over. Yeah, there's a
Go ahead.
microphone right there.
Don't be so polite. No, you go.
Okay, thank you for this opportunity. You're talking about bringing together the people of context and the people of contents
Yeah.
to work together. But often I found it very difficult to bring them. They are not always on the same page.
Yeah.
So you have the people of content, higher educated levels, lawyers, engineers,
Yeah.
and people in the local community who are
Yeah.
not speaking the same language. What would you do to reduce that gap?
Yeah. So first, I mean, that's why I say culture eats strategy for breakfast. You have to build a culture. You have to build shared values. And it starts with also building relationships. So you don't bring them around a table for the first time and say, now let's solve for poverty or policing or whatever. You bring them together and start building relationships and building a shared understanding of what's going on in the community, what's working and what's not, and build common understanding in relationships. In Baltimore, where I'll be next week, we use a process where we brought in all these residents at night and professionals and elected officials. And what we did is we took all the data about the community, about this neighborhood, and we made it very graphical so someone, regardless of their education level, would understand it. We put it up on the walls. And we had people pair up between professionals and residents, and their job was to review it all together and come to consensus about what was the most urgent issue in the community, what was most surprising, what was missing, and some other questions. But what it did is had the professionals and residents working together to make sense of their community, and then make common sense among everyone, so everyone's starting at the same place in terms of understanding what's going on in the community. There were aha moments on all sides. But so I think there's processes you can use that can level set everyone, that can get everyone to the same page into shared language and understanding. There's also ways that when we're bringing, especially people who do not have professional careers in this work to our tables, that we can orient them and support them to learn some of the jargon and history and work on the issues, so when they come, they feel confident in what they know at the content level. One of my favorites was a group in Minnesota that had a person on the board whose job was jargon cop. And anytime someone used jargon at the table, they would raise their hand and the conversation had to stop, and they would define it so no one from the community would ever have to be embarrassed to ask if they didn't understand what something was. So if people use jargon, or if they use kind of insider language or talked about something that happened in the past that not everyone knew, that person would stop the meeting and explain it. So I think there are things you can do to both orient and build the capacity of people to be at the table effectively. I think there's things you can do to build relationships across people, and there's things you can do to build shared meaning about the community, what's going on among people. And those are some of the ways I've seen people try to bridge those differences to get people to work together better. Yeah.
Good evening, all. My name is Mido, and thank you so much for the valuable information that you shared with us tonight. I'm always feel sorry about the hungry people here in Edmonton, and I feel that it's our responsibility as we can help those. So I always think, what are the proper ways to help those people? Sometimes I'm just planning to cook foods and go there and serve them, but some people, because I'm a newcomer, I just came last year, but I feel that I should be part and help those. And so they told me it's not legal or it's not allowed to serve a cooked food to those people, and instead you have to do cans or provide them with some uncooked food. Or whatever, I'm still want to help those people and fight hunger in Edmonton. So
I got something for you. You can go to the Mustard Seed, and they will let you cook a dinner, and you can serve it to people who are hungry.
I was asking
Have you
about
did that?
that.
Yeah.
What's the proper way to do that here and help those hungry people?
So there's one resource, and it's Milo?
Yeah, Mido.
And
I'm
Milo's,
ideal.
I think that if there's others here who have ideas, you've got a volunteer who's ready to help. And I hope there's some people who want to use that because that's awesome. And especially as a newcomer that you want to, that you're coming here wanting to contribute your assets to the community and you're new, that's awesome. And that's what Stepping Up is, and it's beautiful. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, please, if anyone know or have an idea or know what's the proper steps to do that within the law, I wanna fight the hungry here.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mito.
Any last questions?
Here's one here.
Yeah, one.
Yeah.
Jamie.
Hey, so I asked a question yesterday about your Rosa Parks story, and then realized it was a two-parter. So here's the second part. So what I really liked about that story
And you
was,
listened to the whole presentation
Twice.
again for that Part B question. I love it. Thank you.
So part B, the thing I really liked about the Rosa Parks story was that it was a collective impact approach to solving not solving, but to enact a concrete action.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing that people sometimes get tripped up when it comes to collective impact, is that they're trying to solve abstract problems like racism, homelessness, poverty. With your experience, what has been some of your best practice in taking those abstract problems and turning them into concrete actions?
Yeah. Thank you. Great question. So in my work on collective impact, in my consulting work in this, but I won't work with a group that doesn't have a clear, measurable result behind the work. I think that when people can see the needle they're moving, it's easier for them to put aside self-interest and do the difficult work when they can see in real time where that needle's going. I think when it's toward a more vague or abstract result, I think it's harder to hold people accountable and harder to hold that together. Not impossible, but at least in my work, I believe that it's easiest when you're really clear that we're trying to cut infant mortality by 20% or reduce teen pregnancy by 50%, or we're trying to increase third grade reading scores by 20%. Like when you've got a clear, concrete goal, I think it's easier to mobilize action and easier for people to be clear about what they need to do. In Baltimore, where I'm working next week, they're working on the idea of out-of-school, out-of-work youth in this neighborhood around a university that's hired me. And they kept talking about all these abstract ideas, and I said, well, how many young people in the neighborhood are out of school, out of work? And they emailed me this afternoon, 400. I said, you can reach 400 people. You can reach 400 people. But when it was an abstract idea, getting people organized around youth opportunity was harder. When it comes down to there are 400 out of school, out of work young people, and you're a university with over 7,000 students, don't tell me you can't figure out a way to reach 400 people. And so the specificity of the result helps yield to the specificity of the strategies and helps it be clear what needs to happen to move that needle. And so that's, at least in my work, what I really work for is to really get clear about what are the results. How will we know we're succeeding? How will we know we're making progress? How will we know we're doing the right things? And the more we have that, I feel the more effective we can at keeping collectives together to do this work. At least that's what I found in my experience. You've got to have, as I say, rigor around your impact strategy, and you have to have rigor around your culture. And when you have rigor around both, that's the sweet spot. Any last question or thought? Up one last, yeah, thanks. Thank you, it gave me time to drink my water.
There you go. So part of the work I do is with small businesses in sort of vulnerable areas. And I'm wondering how, what is the strategy that you would use to engage with those small businesses who might be vulnerable themselves, those mom and pop shops who are sort of on the front line, get them engaged with these social issues?
Well, one is I'd find out what issues they care about and are passionate about. But I think it's easiest to get people engaged when they care about something. The second is to seek ways that maybe they could do things that are both beneficial to their business and beneficial to the community. In my city a few years ago, we had riots. We had a police shooting, and after the police shooting, there were a series of riots, and the whole neighborhood burned. It was on the international news. It was all over the place. And the day after, we had this emergency meeting downtown, and there's a mayor and the police chief, and our U.S. senators were there, and our representatives, and all these major leaders, and there was these 3 young guys in front. And Reggie, who was our head of violence prevention in our city, I asked him who they were, and he said they own 14 barbershops in the city. And he said they have more relationships with young black males than any other institution I know of. And what Reggie asked that night wasn't, who are the groups that work on violence prevention? He asked, who has relationships in the neighborhoods? And when he asked that question, he saw assets where people don't see them. 2 months later, I'm listening to public radio, and there's a story that morning. Sorry, it wasn't CBC, I'm in the US. But I was listening to public radio, and what I heard was a story about how the public library system was sponsoring haircuts for boys at barbershops in the city if they read books in between their haircuts. And that they'd basically turned the barbershops in the black community into libraries where if boys took out books during their haircut, if they could talk about it at their next haircut, their parents got a discount on the haircut, paid for by the library, and then if they read the books for the whole year, their back-to-school haircuts would be free, sponsored by the library system. So these entrepreneurs were still making money, but they were helping produce literacy in the community. And I use just that example. There's lots of examples of that where people have been creative in thinking about neighborhood businesses, not just as places that can give us money, or places, but places that have leaders and have care about issues and be able to do some things that support the community. In the case of the riot, the barbers were part of the front line the next night because they needed people who knew how to talk to these boys who were angry and about to riot again. And barbers are great conversationalists, and they had relationships with boys. And so it's thinking about the assets these people have, what they bring, what they're good at, what they love to do, what they're passionate about, and helping find ways to connect that to community. And the more they engage and build relationships, the more relationships you have. People who are in relationship with business owners often shop at their stores and use their stores. So it's a way for them to also build connections. So that's how I'd start to think about it. I mean, I need a deeper strategic analysis to do something deeper, but in the couple minutes in a Q&A, that's the best I got.
Thanks very much.
I think that's it. All right.
All right, thanks very much. Thank you very much, Paul. Really appreciate it. Let's give Paul a big hand. Thank you. So thank you for attending the REACH celebration tonight. You were all part of REACH, and so it's a celebration of you and all the work you do. So thank you on behalf of the citizens of Edmonton for doing what you do. We really appreciate it, and there's a lot of work still to be done. So congratulations to you, and give everybody else here a hand who was part of it. Now, we haven't got a lot of evaluation forms, so I'm going to take the door prizes home myself tonight. However, if you do just put your name and phone number on one of the evaluation forms, and maybe just a little note, like the MC was pretty good, just write that down, and that will be an entry, and then we will call a few people at random to give out those prizes. We want to thank all the REACH staff and volunteers for their hard work in making this a very successful day. And on behalf of REACH, I'd like to also extend a thank you to all the exhibitors, Kiwi Productions, and Collaborative Media Group who contributed. And check out all the exhibitor booths on your way out if you haven't had a chance to yet, and learn about the valuable work that's being done in our community by all these people. Once again, you may see REACH volunteers with clipboards handing out the evaluation cards. So if you can fill out an evaluation, we'd really appreciate that. We've got all kinds of great prizes to give away, and Jan will do the draw a little later and give you a phone call. So thank you for having me here tonight. You can listen to Edmonton AM, 93.9 FM, 740 AM, and Paul, cbc.ca/Edmonton. Listen live, even if you're in Minneapolis. It's good. Thank you very much. Good night, everybody.